Seats, please. And we'll get the fourth meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Appropriations and Revenue underway. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boswell.
Here.
Senator Deneen.
Here.
Senator Douglas.
Present.
Senator Funky Fromeyer. Senator Givens. Senator Mays Bledsoe. Senator Neal. Senator Nemus.
Present.
Senator Webb. Representative Banta.
Present.
Representative Bentley. Representative Bowling.
Here. I got you.
Representative Bray.
Present.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Dietz.
Here.
Representative Dossett.
Present.
Representative Flannery. Representative Fleming.
Present.
Representative Fraser Gordon.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Freeland.
Present.
Representative Fugit.
Here.
Representative Gentry.
Here.
Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative McPherson.
Here.
Representative Palumbo.
Here.
Representative Raymond. Representative Riley. Representative Stevenson. Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Representative Co-Chair McDaniel.
Here.
Co-Chair Petrie.
Here. All right, very well. Having a quorum and duly constituted to conduct business, we'll proceed. First item is approval of minutes from the August 21st meeting. Do I have a motion? By
Second.
Senator Boswell, second by Representative Freeland. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Very well. Okay, next up, we're going to deal with funding and outcomes for veterinary and optometry students. Betsy, if you come on up.
Thank you for inviting me to come today and talk about these optometry and veterinary programs. My name is Becky Gilpatrick. I'm Director of Student Aid at Kia. So I'd like to start by talking about the optometry program first. To give you a little context here, as far as the history of the program, we being Kentucky, started an optometry program in 1974. It was a contract spaces program at that time. And those contract spaces programs run through the Southern Regional Education Board. And the way that generally works is that we contract through SREB for a specific number of seats, and then there are participating institutions connected to that, and then SREB negotiates the contract rate, and then we pay that rate out, and to SREB, they distribute it onto the schools. But it holds those seats for our students for that contract amount. So we had 4 participating institutions, and those are the schools that are listed there. And then in 2018, there was a study. House Bill 200 was actually the biennial budget bill for that year. And so in the budget language, it called for a work group to be put together to study the effects of transforming that into a forgivable loan program, and then to also study the return of optometry graduates to Kentucky to practice medicine. That particular work group was headed by the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Kia was not involved with the program at that time, so that all ran through CPE. So just in looking at the study itself, these were the recommendations that came out of it. And basically they ended up deciding, the work group, that the service requirement was not needed at that time because they felt like there was a high enough rate of return of people actually coming back to Kentucky to practice medicine. There were a couple of different things regarding the funding for the program. Primarily at that particular time in Kentucky, there were the general fund was under a bit of strain because that's when we were looking for money to shore up the state pension system. There was also some budget cuts going on at the public institutions, so they want to look at the funding model for those contract seats because that amount kept increasing each year. So that was the budgetary part of it. And then eventually they recommended that be changed from a contract program to a scholarship model and for the administration to be transferred to Kia. And it's shifted the award structure on that so that we would have a committee actually select the scholarship recipients. And last but not least, there was a Kentucky College of Optometry opened its doors in 2016, and the work group wanted to recognize the role that that school would play, expecting that there would be a favorable return to Kentucky with that school being located in Kentucky. And so there is language in the program to dedicate 1/3 of the funding to that school. And so what we have now is an optometry scholarship program. I've given you the KRS there at the top if you're interested in that. Kia entered the scene here with fiscal year 2021. We actually paid out the last year the contract spaces from CPE because that money was put in our budget. And then we got the scholarship program up and running. So the optometry contract students that were already in the program, we kept them grandfathered in so they continued forward, because with the contract spaces, that is actually a commitment that we have made to fund that student for all the years of that contract program. And so that's a 4-year program for the to go through that optometry school. And so for those students who were in year 2, year 3, or year 4, we had to continue to pay that out. We couldn't just drop them off while they were already in school. So what we did is we set that rate to be a fixed rate for those students at the rate that they were for that 2021 year, and we just continued them forward at that rate. The actual first scholarship, the students actually that applied and were selected for the scholarship, they began their enrollment in the fall of 21. So we will have the first graduating class of pure scholarship recipients this upcoming spring. So it takes 4 years for all of that to happen. So we're coming up on that with the program. As I mentioned, there is 1/3 of the appropriation that goes to Kentucky College of Optometry. The committee that selects those is actually established through the statutory language. There is a representative from the Kentucky Optometric Association that sits on that committee. There's also a representative from the Kentucky College of Optometry. And we have 2 at-large members that come from the optometry professional community. They're practicing optometrists. And then there's also 1 representative from one of the non-Kentucky institutions. And so because we have 3 non-Kentucky institutions, we rotate that slot around every 2 years to each of the institutions so they have a fair say in what's happening with the scholarship selection. This slide shows kind of where we are as far as the way the students have worked out with what we've paid over the years and with the award amounts. So as you can see there, the OCS grandfather, that's your contract students that were already in the program, and that number has been declining as those students have graduated and left the contract spaces program. And of course the optometry scholarship numbers have increased as we've actually replaced those students and entered new classes of purely optometry students. So for this fiscal year, you'll see we are at 56 students who are all scholarship recipients. So we are now fully implemented in with not making any payments connected to the contract spaces program students any longer, and having these all be scholarship recipients. Now with the award amounts, it's a little bit more complicated because of some of the things we've had to do to make the money work out. As I mentioned, the contract spaces students were grandfathered. That amount was $19,200. However, the Indiana University School of Optometry, they only charged us $12,536, and that was the difference between their in-state and out-of-state tuition. So we kept them at that amount. They were fine with that, and so that was just the amount that those students continued to receive. When the scholarship recipients came in, they received the actual scholarship amount that was a little above that, and it helped go to other costs of education, such as their materials, their books, their living expenses. The first year of the optometry scholarship, the committee, we all agreed that $14,500 was a reasonable scholarship amount, so that's where we started the program. The next year, there was enough funding available that we increased that to $15,000. And then we ran into a situation with the funding and being able to meet the 1/3 ratio for Kentucky College of Optometry. So we actually came back and increased for students that had entered those first 2 years under the scholarship program, we bumped those amounts up for those students to make the dollars actually work out to meet the statutory requirement. And so that's kind of why you have the 2 asterisks behind the optometry scholarship dollars all this time. But at that far column, you can see the total amount that we've dispersed since Kia has entered the program. The next few slides provide information by institution as to what the institutions have actually provided to us, to Kia, regarding the scholarships. So we have listed there for each of these fiscal years the number of scholarships that were awarded. And it's important to note that when it was the Contract Spaces program, the institutions selected the students. It was a number of seats by institution, and they selected the students based on their admission, criteria. When it became a scholarship program, that all changed. Now the scholarship follows the student. So the student has the choice as to where they take the scholarship within the 4 schools, because we've kept the same 4 schools as far as participating institutions. So this is kind of how this has worked out. So for this year, we have 24 students who are scholarship recipients who have chosen to go to Kentucky College of Optometry. So that's how to read this. For the enrollment counts, this is what the college has provided to us as far as the total number of students that they have who are claiming Kentucky as their state of residence, and the total they have enrolled overall for all states. And for the graduate count, it's the same way. That's out of that count of Kentucky residents, as well as their overall counts for the graduate totals. The practicing in Kentucky, that is either practicing or doing residency, because there is a 1-year residency requirement after they complete that Doctor of Optometry degree program at the college. So that number looks low. However, this is the status of the students at the time of graduation. And so there are some of them. This is all coming from a study that the Kentucky College of Optometry does. It's actually a survey that their staff conduct the week of commencement. So this is information that they've pulled in. So this is at that particular time what these graduates know as far as where they're going to practice or where they're going to do the residency. So some of them will go to residencies out of state. That still means they could come back to Kentucky at some point in the future. That's a possibility. And then there's also some that really don't know where they're going yet. They haven't received an offer of employment, or they don't know, quite what their immediate plans are going to be. So that's why this is just what we know at the time of graduation. And then we also included some information on average student loan debt, just to give you an idea of how much, even though we're paying scholarship dollars, this is how much they're walking out of school actually having to repay. And then I've listed the tuition rate there for each of the colleges, and it's at the bottom of the screen. That is only tuition. The full cost of attendance will be much higher for these students. So for instance, a first-year student entering Kentucky College of Optometry, you're looking at total cost of education, which would include their housing, their food supplies, different things like that, transportation, insurance. That cost is actually closer to $69,000. That's an estimate off the college's website. For a 4th-year student, that cost per year is closer to $80,000. So there's quite a bit more to the cost beyond just the tuition rate. This is how those stats look for Indiana University's College of Optometry. And so with practicing in Kentucky, where we have the unknowns or the not availables, that's where the college did not have information that they could not share. There was not a mechanism in place for them to actually gather the information about who practices from Kentucky. Some of these schools use anonymous surveys that happen after the fact, and so the students may feel it may or may not provide that information, and there's nothing really to connect them back to say, oh, this is the student that was or was not from Kentucky. This is Southern College of Optometry. And again, what information was provided is exactly what I've shared with you on these screens as those schools have given it to us. Southern is in Memphis, Tennessee, for those of you that might not know where that's located. And then this is University of Alabama, Birmingham, and they have had very small participation with us, but they are a very good optometry school. But this is the information that they've had as far as the students, the counts, head counts, and the data. And this is my last slide on the optometry portion of the presentation. And so this gives you an idea of where our optometric coverage is in Kentucky. The counties that are highlighted are those that have no optometric coverage whatsoever. The Kentucky Optometric Board of Examiners provided some data to us that says that there are currently 912 optometrists that are licensed in Kentucky. 718 of those folks have a primary practice in Kentucky, and out of that number, 309 of them have at least one branch that's in another location in Kentucky, so multiple locations that they're working out of. But these counties in yellow, there are 21 of them in total. They do not have any optometrists located with the practice in their particular county.
Ms. Kilpatrick, I'm going to stop you for
Sure.
a second. Well, I'd like to, if the committee has optometric-related questions, I'd like to start with that, then we'll do veterinary in a second. I want to start by going back to the results of the study from House Bill 200 in 2018. Mm-hmm. And one of the working group recommendations there about imposing a service requirement was not required based on the high percentage who are licensed to practice in Kentucky and the pipeline of optometrists from the Kentucky College of Optometry. But when I go over to that slide, I'm not seeing a very high percentage actually returning to the Commonwealth. And I know you say it's just the first year after, but we're looking at 36%, 2018, 27 returning to practice.
So at the time of this, that the study was actually, the work group was put together in 2018, that was based on the information they had at the time. So I think it was anticipated that there would be, a significant presence, a lot of optometry students coming through that Kentucky College of Optometry because it was a new school for us. But that's all that's in the study there. And so this is just the information as it has played out now that we are, 6 years down the road.
So we're really not seeing the fruits of what the work group was led to believe back then necessarily bear out, is what it appears from this.
I can't weigh into that.
Okay. I think that was all I had. I saw, was it Senator Webb? I'm sorry, I apologize. Representative Johnson was on there first. Oh, he was pointing to Senator Webb. Even better.
What a gentleman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask, following up on the chairman's question and the reality of optometrists not returning here, are there factors that we should be considering as policymakers on how to better incent them to do that? And do you think that, I'd be interested in the breakdown of corporate practice, and I think this is pertaining to veterinarians too later on, corporate practice versus private practice, and how the student debt load and the opportunity to start up costs with capital is a factor, and maybe, but the corporate-private thing is really something that's emerging in professions, and I'd be interested to see that breakdown, whether they're working for Walmart or a national company, or being able to go to these areas that are underserved. My dad served an underserved area for 50 years, and so I know a little bit about that. And then when he was trying to recruit somebody to take the practice over, they were competing with corporate nationals that were located in more urban areas.
We can dig into that. We didn't have that level of detail as to where those practices were, but given some time, we can dig further into that to see how that actually pans out.
Yeah. Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the slide that you have up there right now, mm-hmm. We talk about no ophthalmologists in certain, no optometrists in certain areas. Does that also follow that there are no ophthalmologists in those areas either, or is there a differentiation?
There is a differentiation. My understanding is that ophthalmologists require more education. That's a medical degree.
No.
Okay.
I got that. I'm an
Okay.
anesthesiologist. What I'm asking is, when you take a look at the data, we get data on where there are no optometrists. Do we also ask whether there are ophthalmologists in those particular optometrist barren areas as well?
So we did not ask for the data on the ophthalmologists.
Okay.
So all I can say is this is what was provided on licensure for optometrists.
Okay. Thank you.
Very well. Senator Boswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I want to return to the part about the scholarship program. It says here that the committee selects the scholarship awardees. Can you tell me a little bit about the criteria? Is that subjective or simply based on grade point average? What are some of the criteria that's used in that committee selection?
There's a large number of things that are considered by the committee. So KIA has an application that we make available on our website, and it's up there if you want to look at it today. But there is an essay that they write, so there is, they take some of that into account. They do look at grade point average. We ask for the transcripts from the students for their undergrad, so they can go and look at what classwork they've taken and how they performed on that. They look at their entry test scores on some of those entry tests into optometry school, and so it's kind of a wide criteria of things.
So is it fair to say that the people that this is a fair selection process and not necessarily based on gender or any other thing other than, because it sounds like to me there does seem to be some subjectivity there in that program.
Yeah. KIA actually hides the personally identifiable information, so the committee members wouldn't know who a particular student is. They really don't even know which college they're choosing, because we ask them to put on the application where their preferences are, where they may go. So that's kind of hidden from the committee as well. They would not know gender. I don't think we even ask that kind of information on the application.
Thank you. And could I have just one short?
Yes.
So when you talk about the average loan and debt of a student that comes out, does that also consider maybe somebody who's planned their entire life to send their child to school, not a child now becoming an adult? Does that include the people that don't have any debt when they come out? So there are some people that don't have debt.
I think that number is of the students who have debt.
Who have debt.
That is the average debt level.
Thank you.
All right, very well. We're going to jump on over into veterinary.
So just like we started with the optometry program, I want to give you a little history on the veterinary program. We started out as a veterinary contract spaces program in 1951. And again, that was a partnership through the Southern Regional Education Board. That was also, we worked with Auburn University College of Veterinary Medicine. So they are still our partner with veterinary contract spaces. So this now makes 74 years that we have had a good partnership with them. Up until 2020 in that session, the contract spaces program, the funding only appeared for that in the budget language. There was no other statutory language that actually outlined anything regarding to the veterinary contract spaces program. That also, prior to that FY21, the program was administered through the Council on Post-Secondary Education. So I'm trying to stick with the information that primarily I know since KIA came into the picture. But what we currently have is that we are funding, Kentucky is funding 164 contract seats each year, and that's at 2 institutions. We give the bulk of those seats to Auburn University. They admit 38 students from Kentucky each year to Auburn, and we have 12 seats that are awarded to Tuskegee University's College of Medicine, and that ends up being 3 per class that they can offer. KIA verifies Kentucky residence for those students, and then we communicate that information to the institutions. The institutions are still selecting the students that they want to award, that they want to actually offer seats to at their college. And like the optometry program, when it was contract spaces, SREB sets that contract rate each year. For the for the veterinary program, the benefits of the contract spaces are for just 8 semesters, which is the equivalent of 4 years. I would note, though, that the Auburn program, it actually takes 9 semesters for them to complete that program. And so the Kentucky students are considered in-state students for that purpose, and they receive those in-state tuition benefits for that extra semester, even though we aren't paying the contract spaces amount to Auburn. There was similar language in that House Bill 200 back in 2018 that kind of took the same approach to veterinary contract spaces as it did the optometry program, wanting a work group to look at a forgivable loan approach, and to look at, in particular, the number of graduates returning to Kentucky to practice large animal medicine, because there is a shortage of large animal veterinarians. There was at that time, and there still exists a shortage today. So part of those recommendations that came out of that work group, they decided there that we had a pretty decent return of those graduates coming back to Kentucky, and so they thought that the forgivable program really was not necessary at that point. They did encourage us to continue participating, purchasing the contract spaces through Auburn and through Tuskegee, given the relationship at that time with those institutions. And there was concerns there again about the funding for the situation, or for the contract spaces, and so they felt there was a priority to maintain 164 seats, that we wanted to keep that up. But they also wanted to explore strategies for providing lower cost loans to those veterinary students in case there was not enough general fund support for the students. So I would add that I told you that the Kentucky is considered an in-state tuition rate for those students, to give you an idea of what the difference would be on that. So for this academic year, the 24-25 year, at the Auburn University College of Veterinary Medicine, the in-state tuition rate, and this is just tuition, not full cost of attendance, but the in-state tuition rate is $31,000, $31,974 actually, so almost $32,000. For out-of-state students, that's $54,000. So there's a nice gap there that our students are saving just because we're paying the difference through the contract program. For Tuskegee, that is a private college that's there in Alabama. Those students, the tuition rate is the same for in-state and out-of-state, but that's $45,492 for everybody tuition at Tuskegee. So it is a little more affordable to actually go to Auburn than it is Tuskegee. This is a look at what the program activity has been for the last 4 years, and then of course I've given you the numbers for this fiscal year and the next year as far as the way the appropriation works out. The request for this presentation was to look at the number of first-year students entering the program, so that is what is listed on this. But there is the total number of recipients that we've paid each year on that. Some things to note about this is that even though we have 164 seats that we offer and we contract for each year, those numbers are falling below that mark. There's a lot of reasons for that. Every now and then we will have a student that will need to sit out a semester or a year for various reasons, and they'll come back, they'll enter, they'll exit the program, or it could be that we've had a student drop out along the way, but because it's a 4-year program, we're kind of tied into, for instance, 38 students are admitted from Kentucky each year at Auburn. So if we have a student who drops out in their 3rd year, they can't just add another student to that class because they are actually extending offers for just that 38. So it kind of, the numbers play out over a 4-year lifespan for those students. For this year, I have the amount there that was appropriated and then the amount to fully fund. Now, there's a difference between those amounts, but I will also let you know that because we have unpaid seats in the prior years, there is continuing fund language for KIA in the budget, and we have rolled those funds forward, so we have enough continuing funding appropriation that we can pay all 164 seats. So the funds are there, even though that's not new dollars appropriated, it's just continuing from the prior year. This is a look at the contract space, the veterinary graduates returning to Kentucky. All of this data comes from Auburn University. We requested the same data from Tuskegee University. All we received back from them was 1 graduate from Kentucky in 2022. So they do not have a lot of success tracking the actual graduates. And again, this uses, for the veterinary schools, they use a senior survey that's conducted at the time that they graduate, and that's the American Veterinary Medical Association does that senior survey. It's all anonymous, so that makes it very difficult for the veterinary schools to know the students, identify the students who are from Kentucky that are coming back to Kentucky to practice. So, but this is the information that Auburn was able to present to us. So the employment numbers are for the graduates from Kentucky that knew they were employed at the time of graduation, and then for those that were actually knew they were going to be employed in Kentucky. And so that percentage there rolls off of those last two columns before that, as far as the percentage of students who knew they were going to graduate and work in Kentucky. So, and that comes up to about a 67% rate of return. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that there are a number of things that these students could move on to after receiving their Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. For example, they may decide to continue their education and go into a specialty area. That could be 4 or 5 or even more years afterwards. And they could return to Kentucky at that point in time, and we would not know because we've lost them at that point. This is just the connection with the college itself and who's provided the data at that time that they've left the college. They could also be taking a break and going into the military. There are all kinds of things that could be happening with the graduates. So that's 67%, 68% that we know at the time of graduation are actually coming back immediately to start work. But there are others in that count that we do not know what happened to them over the long term. So for this last graduating class, the survey data usually comes out in September, so we did not have that data in time to include it for this presentation, but that should be coming across just any time now. This is a look. Also, this information is provided by the Auburn University, and this gives examples of what salaries look like for the different types of veterinary practices, and what average student loan debts look like at the time of graduation. And this is like the optometry for those that have the debt at the time, practicing for those. So for the animal practices, for this 2023, which was the most recent year that was available, you can see the large animal veterinarians are generally making around $130,000. Equine, they're $125,000, and then you have your mixed and your small animals, and what they would generally make a year. And then, of course, for Kentucky graduates, because we're able to kind of discount them a little bit through the contract spaces program, the student loan debt, the average there is $167,000, which is just right above Alabama. And for the at-large students, though, it is much higher, and we are well under the national mean when they look at everybody across the U.S. This is what veterinary shortage areas look like in Kentucky. And so to kind of explain the way this works out, the blue areas, which are classified as actual veterinary shortage areas, those are the areas that are identified by the Kentucky Board of Veterinary Examiners as having shortages in services offered or in species, certain species of animal that are served in that area. It could also be a shortage area that's identified and nominated by the state veterinarian, or recommended areas for that designation in accordance with the National Veterinary Medical Service Act that's published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Sorry, I'm used to saying education, Department of Agriculture. The underserved rural areas are designated by the state veterinarian as an area of Kentucky with a low ratio of practicing veterinarians to the livestock in a city with populations less than 25,000 and more than 20 miles from a city with a population that's greater than 50,000. So there's some ratios that go into those areas that are all in green on this map. And so we mapped this out because out of this last legislative session, there was a new program. It's a veterinary medicine student loan repayment program, and so this is one that Kia is currently working on implementing. It will provide student loan repayment benefits to veterinarians who are practicing in large animal medicine. These awardees have to provide 1 year of service before they receive that student loan benefit. There is a selection committee for this. And I've listed there who the members are of that committee, including Commissioner of Agriculture or his designee. The Board of Veterinary Examiners has a representative there. The Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association has a representative, Kentucky Farm Bureau, and the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association. So we were able to get that group together. We ran a short application process this past June. We had 27 veterinarians apply. And so they were able to get together and we selected 5. So we now have 5 veterinarians in Kentucky who are providing that first year of service, so that this time next year we will actually be paying the first student loan benefits, repayment benefits out to those folks for the first year. So the amount is incremental. So it starts with $12,500 for the first year of service provided, and then it increases each year up to 5 years, which is the limit for the program. In that 5th year, it's $22,500, it's where it maxes out. So that in total, the amount of student loan repayment will not exceed $87,500, or if they owe less than that because they're having to make student loan payments throughout this period, if they end up getting under that amount, then we're only going to pay the amount that's lesser of that, so they wouldn't get the extra to put out of pocket. It's only going to be off their student loan balance. So KIA's role in this, of course, is the administering agency. We will be having this in our budget when we come back to the budget submission process next fall. And we are actually coordinating application process, putting information up on our website for the public to consume, and then of course following up all the information with the recipients of this to track their service and verify all of that. The program's currently funded at $1.1 million, and so that is enough money, and it has continuing language on the appropriation, so we will be able to roll that forward and continue to pay those benefits for the first few years of the program. And that is my last slide.
All right, thank you very much. Representative McCool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your placement rate for in Kentucky is 67 to 68% for graduates, but yet you say there's still a shortage, and they said what is that number? How many more do you need?
I do not have a hard number as to the actual number of veterinarians that we need overall to make all of those shortage areas disappear. I don't know that number. We could work on getting a guess for that number.
Thank you.
Very good. Senator Boswell.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I know a similar question. So if someone were to, say, have all their debt paid off, is there any incentive program for them to help repay some of their debt as an incentive for them to do the same thing as those who have debt? So you have an incentive program that you pay back, help large animal people pay off their debts. Let's say someone has completed that program, but they don't have a debt. Is there any incentive to help maybe reimburse them for some of the debt, some of the money they paid out, or is it just for people who have debt?
There's no mechanism in the statute to reimburse veterinarians who've already paid off their student loan debt. So we actually verify at the time of application that there is sufficient debt. There's actually, they have to have so much debt, I think at least $75,000 worth of debt. And I'm pulling that number off the top of my head because it's been a while since I've looked at the language, but they have to have a certain amount of debt before they can even be eligible for that program.
Okay, so really, essentially, you're saying you're better off with a little debt if you won't apply for money. I mean, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With us having 41 total slots that we're supporting, what's the waiting list look like, if there is a waiting list of Kentucky students who would like to be enrolled in veterinarian school somewhere?
So for this past year with Auburn University, and this was for the class of students who are applying to enter this fall, so they would have been last year's applicants, there were a total of 120 students from Kentucky who applied for admission to the Auburn University College of Veterinary Medicine, and they selected only 38.
So those 120 applicants or potential applicants, would you say that all 120 were qualified to enter veterinarian school, or would some of them be
We had,
not allowed?
So actually last week, we have an annual meeting of pre-veterinary advisors with our undergraduate institutions, and we get them together and the colleges come and they present their admissions criteria so they know how to counsel the students. And I asked that specific question. If all of those students were ready to go into veterinary school, if they go to other schools, what happens to them? And the answer I got back very quickly was that not all of them are actually ready to be admitted to a veterinary school.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my concern in that we truly have no idea how many veterinarian graduates we're retaining. We don't, because the questions are asked, where are you going to be during your senior year? And we don't have any follow-up of where they're going after that year. Many of them likely will not enter those practices, and they may do something else for another year and then decide to set up their practices because it takes time. I just want to express that as a concern that I have. The other thing I want to ask, if you will bear with me, we base the number of veterinarians that we need on the number of animals. Does anyone look at utilization of the veterinarians? There are a lot of animals that never get taken to the veterinarian.
Yeah, and there was a work group last summer. Kentucky Department of Agriculture led that initiative, and I know there were representatives from all the different constituents, agriculture groups that were there. I sat in on it for Kia. There was a lot of discussion about practices, and I know there are a lot of veterinarians in the state who have mobile practices. They may go and serve animals across, a 6-county region, for example. But I don't know if the information is there. I could ask the question about, what the saturation rate is, where there, it is difficult to get, say for cattle, for example, to get a vet, to come out to that. You certainly can't put them in, haul them easily to a veterinary clinic. So that's a concern as well. And there are some areas in Kentucky where it is not affordable for a veterinarian to actually make a living because there are not enough animals for them to actually provide that service.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. Just briefly, first of all, could you, if you can, offer commentary? It looks like there's a much higher dropout rate in the optometry space than the veterinary space based off of the numbers that you had here. I don't know if there's a comment to be offered on that or not. And secondarily, in the veterinary space, I did notice that we're not using all the slots at Tuskegee, and yet we're using everything, and we have extras from Auburn. Could you comment, is there an issue with Tuskegee?
The short answer is yes. Tuskegee has a more difficult time finding students from Kentucky to apply. We have had conversations with them over the last few years to see what we can do about that, how we can remedy that situation. So they are very much aware of that we are concerned about that and expect better from them. But if they don't have the students apply, there's very little they can do about that. But as far as the other question, I really don't have an answer to that one.
Okay. Very well. All right. All right. Thank you for the time today.
Thank
Sincerely
you.
appreciate it. All right. Next up, we've got the Finance Cabinet for update on the Capitol Building construction.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. My name is Holly McCoy Johnson. I am the Secretary of the Finance Cabinet. I have with me today Sam Ruth, who is the Commissioner of the Department for Facilities and Support Services, and Robert Long, who is the General Counsel of Finance and Administration. You have asked for an update on the Capitol Campus renovation project. First of all, I want to start by saying, of course, the total amount budgeted for this renovation is $291.5 million. The initial phase began review and design of the mechanical, electrical, and design elements and some interior and exterior renovations. We hired the architect and engineering firms of EOP and PDP to do the work of design for that. As preliminary work was undertaken, More detailed information has come to light regarding the condition and needs of the 114-year-old building. Often restorations were more expensive than originally planned, and where we were originally told that a restoration would occur upon further examination, replacement was determined would be needed. We worked with the engineering firm to determine what was required for building preservation, occupant and visitor safety, and security and code compliance. As the architectural firm has completed their detailed investigation of the Capitol, some challenges were encountered that required a redo of certain elements of the planning and design of the project, as well as some cost issues. We are working through those. The governor has met over the summer with the Speaker and Senate President to go through what we have found and what that means for the project. The terraces cannot be repaired as per initially designed. We were told that they could be repaired, and it turns out that they will need to be replaced. That cost will be greater to do so by quite a bit. Also, there are various repairs that are recommended but not required that we can take into consideration, and the south elevator replacement may not be something that is an absolute necessity. The project's authorizing language through the capital budgets consistently references mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure upgrades to the Capitol, and recently specified dome and lantern renovation, security windows, and repairs to comply with building codes. We are able to meet the project scope and stay within budget. We previously testified about the current building occupants and discussions we are having regarding their space needs. We have testified that the architectural firm and the cabinet have held multiple discussions with the legislative branch and were considering various options to accommodate its needs. Ultimately, the decision was to erect a temporary building for the General Assembly sessions. To assure continuity of government and the continuous availability of the House and Senate chambers until the temporary chambers are ready for occupancy, the renovation of the Capitol will begin only once the temporary chambers are in place and after the 2025 session. Construction on the Capitol is to begin after the 2025 session, probably in June. Substantial completion for the temporary chambers is expected to occur December of 2024. Currently, everything is on schedule and moving along. We will prepare offices and other needs for preparation to be ready to be used following the 2025 session. Multiple big packages have started going out and should be ready for that June 2025 start date. The project is estimated to take 3.5 years, so that would be an estimated completion toward the fall, early winter of 2028. We are currently working with our Division of Real Properties to either identify or reconfigure space to meet up the needs of the current tenants. And that includes the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, the Governor's Office, and the Supreme Court. All tenant agencies will be held harmless, and the project will bear the costs of relocation for the associated tenants. So I'm ready to take questions if you have some.
We've not seen any activity in the scaffolding for pushing a year now. Why is that?
I will probably rely some on Commissioner Ruth there, but I know that they had to pull down the tiles, and there was some scanning done of the tiles, and we did put out the bid for the tiles to be redone. I think that there was a moisture membrane put up. Sam, I looked to Sam to make sure that I'm not misspeaking. And currently, those tiles are now being developed per specification of the tiles that were taken down so that they can be put back up. Do you have something you might want to add to what I've said?
As the Secretary said, each tile had to be scanned because each tile is different. That was done. Originally, we thought there would be 4 manufacturers that could produce the tile. As we started sending them the scans, 3 of them dropped out. We were left with 1. That one's in England. And we, because of the process of getting them the data to build, other customers got in front of us, and that slowed it down a little bit. But they now have the delivery order, and they're manufacturing the tiles as we speak. We're trying to cut as much time out of that as possible. Instead of them sending samples over for us to approve, the consultant is going to go to England and approve them on the spot. And that should cut out, the delivery time across the ocean. So it's a process, and it's underway.
When can we expect them to be installed and the scaffold begin to come back down?
The scaffolding will be up for a while, because even after the tiles are done, there's some repair work that has to be done below the actual dome, and that can't happen until the scaffolding or the tiles are installed.
So what is the scheduled projection for that right now?
I don't have that answer for you right now.
And who bears the cost of, that scaffolding is not cheap. That's a heck of a piece of work. Who's bearing the cost for all these empty months of it sitting there?
It's part of the project cost.
Okay. This timeline seems pretty exceptionally long. I think that when Chair Petrie and I first started having these conversations back in early 22, we certainly did not expect this to be drawing out in the way that it has. And I do understand there's changes. Renovation work is very complex, especially if you go down there and look at that rat's nest of wiring that's occurred over the course of the years in the basement. That being said, what are some of the major causes of the delays at this point?
I think the biggest cause is finding new things. Every time we turn a corner, there's something else we find that has to be not just repaired but replaced. Or the initial study didn't uncover that object that had to be replaced. So we're discovering things all the time, which causes delays.
I'll tell you that a lot of us on the committee have been approached by people saying that it's a reluctance of the executive branch to move that is causing the overarching delays. Can you comment to that?
That has not caused me any delays at all.
Okay, very good. Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'll just bear with me, I was sort of struck by the thought, or at least the comment, we thought there may be 4 companies that could provide this, and now there's only 1. I'm a little concerned with the initial consultant who said we can do certain things, or there would be these groups who would be able to provide those tiles. That's really concerning when we know how old the Capitol is. It wasn't something new, or we didn't think about this. I certainly don't want someone to tell me at this level that, quote, we didn't think about this. That would be really, really concerning. The other question I have is, going from 4 people who could possibly provide these products down to 1, how does that affect the cost?
I think the one that could provide it gave a bid not based on other people that could or couldn't provide. I think they just gave the bid they gave, and I don't think it was impacted by the fact that they were the only ones. I don't think they knew they were the only ones.
I would say they didn't know they were the only
Right.
ones that were bidding at the time.
May I, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, one more? And if I may, what concerns, therefore, have you expressed to the consultant group that did the initial study?
I talk to them weekly, and my concerns are we need to get this moving along. And one of the problems we had initially is we approached this as we had approached many, many projects to put Band-Aids on things and fix a specific item. And we went down that road. The initial,
If I may, who is we?
me,
Okay.
because of the budget. I only had so much money to deal with. The initial project was low voltage. And as Senator McDaniel brought out, if you look at the snake pit of wires in the basement, that was something we were going to address. And after going to, and then there was going to be a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing project, and a window replacement project. After we got into it, we found out that we can't Band-Aid this. It's got to be, you got to do everything at once. And Senator McDaniel was kind enough to give us money to do a larger scope of project. And so we started designing it from a holistic approach as opposed to looking at individual projects that, you know, were a few $1 million each.
Yeah, I apologize for monopolizing. Again, my concern goes back to what we consider the consultant. Aren't these things that the consultant said in the beginning, we can't just Band-Aid this? We have, because they're consultants. They're the ones who know, can we just simply add on, or do we need to go back and address all of these other things? My concern is, why didn't we know those things up front?
The original projects,
Regardless of what the original project was, and I apologize, regardless of what the original project was, the purpose of a consultant is to look at the big picture and say, these are the things that you want to do, and it's okay to do these because these other things are already intact.
Yep.
And I'm not hearing that.
we didn't bring on the current consultant until after the original projects were underway.
Okay.
And after we brought him on, and he brought in another consultant from out of state that has experience in renovating capitals and historic buildings, that's when they said, wait a minute, don't do this piecemeal, let's have a big project.
Okay. Thank you very
And
much.
so it was something we discovered later on.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Co-Chair Petrie.
Thank you, Chair. Just simply, what consultant was used up front with the limited scope project?
I don't recall the name.
There was one.
Oh, yes, there was.
Was there more than one?
There was a consultant for the medium voltage. I think there was a different consultant for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and then a consultant for the windows project. So I think there were three, but I can get that for you.
So if I'm understanding correctly, at that point of the project and its inception, different projects, no one overarching consultant to advise on whether to proceed universally like a general contractor.
Correct.
So I'm going to assume you or a division you're in were acting as a general contractor, and you had 3 or 4 consultants for these particular projects.
No, we weren't acting as a general contractor. We just assumed these were 3 projects that we could do independently of each other.
Was there any thought up front of getting someone as a general contractor or a universal consultant to see if it was better to do a larger project as opposed to individual projects at that time?
I wish I had done that. I did not.
Fair enough.
I take credit for that. If I had it to do over again, I would have a holistic approach and get someone that could do that for me.
Fair enough, Mr. Chair. When a more universal consultant came on board, looking more holistically, I think is the way you described it, about when did that entity come on board, and has there only been one such entity, or do we have a succession?
I don't know the dates. I can get those for you. We have one consultant who has a consultant helping them that is specialized in doing capitals and historic properties.
So we have one general
Yes.
that's helping at this point.
Right.
And it's always been that one general since that one's come on board.
Yes.
Yes.
And is there a contract between the state or a series of contracts between the Commonwealth of Kentucky and that general contractor?
Well, The consultant is
I'm
a
sorry,
architect.
I'll say general consultant rather than general contract.
you
Sorry,
have a contract.
wrong industry. Is there a contract or a series of contracts with that general consultant?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and do those contracts contain performance terms, or are they just paid by the hour or performance, as in if you do something you get paid, or is it a performance of time management, getting things done on a timetable, getting them done at a certain expense level?
There's not a timetable on that, nor are they paid by the hour.
Is there any penalty for it taking 14 years as opposed to 4 years for this particular general consultant?
No.
And do they still get paid if it lasts 14 years? For so long as there's funding by the General Assembly to do so?
I think if it goes beyond the 4 years that the Secretary talked about, we'd have to address their inability to perform.
So 4 years is the expected timetable that's reasonable for this to be completed?
Yes.
4 years from what date? Approximately. Give me a quarter and a year.
What was the date you gave?
I think that from the time that it starts, we expect it to be completed in 42 months was the estimate.
And I'm just following up on Chairman
more
McDaniel's
design.
question. So timetable, we would expect completion when again?
What did you give?
Well, we expect that when it starts, we expect the project to be completed in 3.5 years once it starts
And we expect it to start when?
in the summer,
June.
June
June of,
25.
just making sure. Just making sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Boswell, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. There it goes. Thank you. So 2 times you mentioned the word code. You mentioned code compliance and building codes. And it's been my experience, and I just want to do a little commentary about this. It's very, very difficult under Kentucky codes and laws to remodel an existing structure. And I found this in my own business, and I found this throughout the state. This is a serious problem, and I'm confident this is part of the problem. We've adopted some codes, sometimes some of our national codes that may not necessarily fit in Kentucky, and I'm confident this is part of the problem, and it's going to cause more expense, and it's going to be part of the delays, and I'm confident that's part of the problem without even asking that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I had one follow-up. I just missed it. I had asked who the general consultant is. What's the name of the general consultant entity and the sub-consultant that's on particular state capital renovations?
EOP.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you. I'm not sure that your mic is on.
EOP is
That's the full name of it?
it's the name of 3 men. I don't remember the name.
And that's the general
EOP.
consultant?
Yes.
And who's the sub-consultant that works on state houses?
DP,
Is it PDP?
PDP.
PDP?
And is that an abbreviation of
Yes.
a longer? Okay, thank you.
I want to have one more follow-up here, an action item for you guys. You can sense a little bit of frustration, and maybe some of that's just general one-off owners' frustration with any complex construction project, but some of it we want to keep a little better tabs, I think, than we have. What I would appreciate is if sometime in the next month, you guys would get us a schedule. It doesn't have to be, down to we're replacing this laboratory on this date kind of thing, but some major milestones that we can get together. And I'm very fearful, Madam Secretary, that what I might be hearing is we're going to be brought some budgetary overruns. And so I would really like to know, kind of on the major end items, where we were originally and where we are now, so that we can kind of take those side by side and understand what it is that we're potentially headed towards. So if you guys, like I say, in the next month, could just work on getting those to the committee, I'd appreciate it. All right?
Will do.
Very well. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank
We
you.
Sincerely appreciate it. All right. Last up, we have some testimony on the cybersecurity working group. I think that there's none of us that haven't heard lately about lately and even before that about some of the issues surrounding cybersecurity, some shortages nationwide on professionals doing that work, and the potential economic damages that can happen with some of those breaches. We're very fortunate to have a recognized expert on that here in the Commonwealth, also serving as an elected official. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Dave Hatter. Would you push your button there?
There we go, green light. I should know this, we have the same mics at the city building. So thank you all for having me. Thank you, Chairman McDaniel, for the invitation. Let me get this fired up and we'll dive right into it so I don't take any more of your time than necessary. Before I dig too deep into this, though, I just wanted to say thanks to all of you for passing the Kentucky Consumer Data Privacy Act last year. I've been an advocate of that for a long time, and as a consumer, I very much appreciate you guys getting that done. That said, as Chairman McDaniel mentioned, I've been in the IT business for over 30 years. I mean, look at me, I'm a total dork. What else could I do, right? And I mean, there's a little background. I'm not going to read all that stuff to you, but in addition to being in the business for over 30 years, most of it as a software engineer, in the last 7 or 8 years focused primarily on cybersecurity. I've been an elected official in the city of Fort Wright for a grand total of 25 plus years, so I understand the challenges of local governments, and that's one of the things that was so interesting to me about what Ohio has done here. I don't think it's any surprise to any of you that cybercrime is rising. This came from Statista. You can see some of their sources are data from the FBI. I participate in an organization in Cincinnati called InfraGard. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a public-private partnership between the FBI and private businesses like ours to help try to get a handle on cybersecurity in general and more specifically in the critical infrastructure sector. And I recently had an agent from the Cincinnati office mention that they believe really only about 25% of cybercrime is actually reported. Unless there's a reporting requirement under some kind of law like the Kentucky Consumer Data Privacy Act, a lot of it goes unreported. So you can take these numbers for what they're worth. Again, you'll see numbers all over the map, but the one thing you will consistently see when you look into this is a hockey stick-like spike up both in the frequency of cyber attacks and the impact of cyber attacks. Here's some recent headlines. Most of you are probably familiar with the CrowdStrike incident that happened not long ago, where a third-party software vendor took down millions of computers, billions of dollars of damage. And I want to remind folks, there's no evidence that this was any sort of cyber attack. One of the things I'm going to bring up here in a minute is supply chain attacks, and we've seen some recent evidence of that in Lebanon in the past day or so. But when you look at the impact on our society, right? Who here does not have a smartphone? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. Who here does not spend more time online? Who here does not work online? Who doesn't bank online, educate themselves online, entertain themselves online? My point being, our society is increasingly digital. There's software in everything now. Your car is a computer. Your refrigerator is a computer. Your sweeper is a computer. By the way, if you have a Roomba, I suggest you go home, smash it into pieces, and throw it in the garbage as soon as possible. I'll be happy to explain why in more detail offline if you want. But everything has software in it. Our society is increasingly digital, and I would argue increasingly fragile as a result. And again, this CrowdStrike incident is a perfect example of that. This is a third-party company that makes software designed to keep your organization secure, and unfortunately, due to a bad update, caused a gigantic outage. And I'm going to suggest to you strongly, you don't have to take my word for it, this is just a taste of what is coming to our society if we don't get really serious about cybersecurity and the impact of nation-state actors like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, kind of the axis of evil, if you will, in this space. We see stories like this. The FBI has 16 areas identified as critical infrastructure in the United States. Obviously, election is part of that, whether it's water, whether it's power, whether it's logistics. We are increasingly reliant on software. Some of you may be familiar with the Stuxnet thing that happened with Iran and Israel many years ago. Obviously, it's, while as far as I know, the United States has never claimed it, someone was able to slip software into the uranium enrichment devices in Iran, and while they reported that they were operating correctly, they basically blew themselves apart. I mean, this is all well documented. And again, as I get to this next slide, this is where we're at in society. Your computer is essentially a grenade. I love this graphic because I think it's very visceral. And when you look at what just happened in the past 2 days in Lebanon and Syria, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with this now, the exploding pagers, and now apparently a bunch of walkie-talkies blew up today. While I'm not going to tell you that's a cyber attack in the strictest sense, It's more of a supply chain attack. Apparently, these devices were intercepted along the way. Explosives were planted in them. At least that's the best theory. I don't really believe you could make a battery explode with the kind of intensity that we've seen in some of the footage of this. We are an increasingly fragile place. And again, as an elected official, as a Kentucky native, I want to encourage you all to take this extremely seriously. And again, reach out to law enforcement contacts, the Kentucky Department of Homeland Security. You're going to hear the same sort of thing from me, I think, from them as well. So enter the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee. So despite being a lifelong Kentuckian, I live about 5 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. I can see Cincinnati from my house, and our business is in Cincinnati. I spend a lot of time in Ohio as a result, right? While we have clients in Kentucky, most of our clients are in Ohio, which is how I originally became aware of this program. They have something, and I'm going to kind of break it down for you. And I also want to point out most of this slide deck, I tried to leave completely unadulterated from the slide deck that the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee uses to promote their various initiatives and programs in Ohio. So I tried to leave it alone as much as possible. I did insert a few things along the way. You can see Ohio's cyber community working together to help Ohio citizens and organizations achieve world-class cybersecurity. And I also want to say special thanks to Mark Bell, who works out of the Ohio Adjutant General's office. He has been an invaluable resource for me in trying to understand how do they get this done in Ohio, how does it work in Ohio. He provided this slide deck, et cetera. So if we look at this now, again, I left everything from Ohio in here so you could understand how they're viewing it and how they're promoting it to people in Ohio. I'm not going to read all of this to you. It covers some of the same ground we've already covered, but I do want to point out prevention is much cheaper than remediation. And when you look at the increasing possibility of the kinetic impact on our physical society, like these pagers, like the fact that you could potentially turn off the water or shut off the power, which would eventually turn off the water. The fact that again, I'm old enough to recall the Bhopal, India disaster. If you could attack a chemical plant and cause a chemical release of something like chlorine, you could literally kill thousands of people. If you could derail a train full of chlorine gas in a heavily urban area like downtown Louisville, you would potentially kill thousands of people. So again, I don't want to be too hyperbolic here, although people who know me well, like Senator McDaniel, will tell you my nickname is Doomsday Dave. And I did have to put my periscope out of the bunker to check to make sure I could come down to Frankfurt today. But in all seriousness, these are real threats. And again, you can see what the FBI, DHS, others are saying about these things. So again, from the OC3, they identified these threat actors. I think it's a pretty good list. And while much of the cybercrime that takes place today is financially driven, and the motive is the theft of money or data that leads to money, you do have these nation-state actors out there, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, others, who have other incentives and other motives, right? Including causing chaos, disrupting elections, and potentially creating some kind of kinetic event. Let's say, for example, China decided to invade Taiwan tomorrow. If they could turn off substantial portions of the power grid, we would have a real problem on our hands. Again, I'm not an expert on supply chain in general, but my understanding is there's only about 3 days worth of supplies in terms of food and that sort of stuff in the supply chain. So again, I think it's well past time to take these kinds of threats seriously. So the mission of the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee to provide an environment for collaboration between key stakeholders, including education, business, and local government, to strengthen cybersecurity for all in the state of Ohio and to develop a stronger cybersecurity infrastructure. And I would ask you going forward, just every time Ohio shows up in here, think Kentucky, right? Because my ask of you today would be, they've already developed this, I think, exceptional program. It works very well. It has been working very well for a long time. And in my mind, there's no reason why we can't literally just sort of lift and shift what they've done, and they're willing to help, into Kentucky. You can see there's basically 4 subcommittees. Education and workforce development. Part of this is about ensuring that we have qualified people in the state of Kentucky to do these jobs and to stop the brain drain. Cyber Range is basically nerd speak for an environment they've created through universities across the state of Ohio. UC is a main hub of this, where folks can go and get training. Not only can students get training, but people involved in their cyber reserve, which I think is one of the most interesting aspects of this, can go and train on these ranges. So they have real world experience. And in the event of a cyber attack, think, Army National Guard, Army Reserve, they have actual experience and can be engaged to go help municipal governments, for example. Cyber protection and preparedness, that's more of an education thing and working with local governments to fill in the gaps because, let's face it, most local governments don't have an endless well of cash for this stuff. They don't have people that know about this stuff. They need all the help they can get. And then the final piece there, governance and public awareness. I would strongly argue that, we're well past the point in time where cybersecurity is an IT only thing. In fact, if you look at it from an IT perspective, most IT people are not cybersecurity experts. It's really its own discipline. It requires its own training. It requires its own skill. And there really should be some sort of separation of duties between the people who are setting the systems up and the people that are securing them. So that last piece there is about going out to the public and helping the public be aware of things that they can do not only to protect themselves and their families, but as everything gets increasingly interconnected, could someone attack you that leads to then some, downstream attack on a chemical plant or something? Sadly, the answer is yes, especially with more people working remotely. So according to Ohio, why is this important? You can see here, grow the workforce, nearly 11,000 jobs. Now this deck also is from May, so this data is probably not quite exactly accurate, but they're saying there's 11,000 advertised vacancies related to cybersecurity jobs in the state of Ohio. I don't know what the number is for Kentucky. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to do that research, but I'm sure it's pretty substantial. And these are lucrative jobs. They pay well. There's a lot of opportunity there. And again, I would argue we not only need these people to help protect our society in Kentucky, let's keep these high-paying jobs here in Kentucky. This is an example of one of the things they're doing where they go out to schools and they try to get students interested at K through 12 in cybersecurity as a career, why it's important, what they can do to protect themselves and their families. This Ohio Cyber Range. Again, this is how I originally found out about this. Spending a lot of time in Ohio and knowing a lot of people that kind of work in this community, I discovered they had this Ohio Cyber Range. And now, again, I'm 30 years in the business. I spent most of my time as a programmer. I'm a total nerd, and I freely admit that, okay? I enjoy the technology. I enjoy the bits and bytes and that sort of thing. So I immediately took an interest in this Cyber Range thing and then started to work back up the thread to wow, they've got this whole elaborate program that's doing all these great things for the citizens of Ohio. And again, this is kind of where I started to take an interest in it and also learned that this entire program basically operates out of the Ohio National Guard and is funded by the state, but more on that in a second. Here's some recent good press they got out of the Cincinnati media market about the drills they're doing with the Ohio National Guard and the public-private partnership they've created with businesses like ours to get people trained up and be in a position to respond to crises, to go out and do education, that sort of thing. This next slide, for some reason, loads really slow. I apologize. Gives you some idea of the scope of this across the state of Ohio. You can see 48 participating counties, 27,888 citizen users. So again, I don't want to belabor that too much. You all have this deck. Again, the nerd in me, and I also spent 8 years in the Army Reserves, so I kind of respect their National Guard aspect of this. This is an initiative they do every year now, a formal several-day training period where they bring in people from the National Guard, they bring in citizens who are part of this cyber reserve, and they go through this extensive training session. So again, they're preparing people to be able to hit the street in the event of some sort of crisis. You can see they have a wide-ranging number of people on their executive committee and a fairly good-sized board that operates this OC3 in Ohio. You've got these various cybersecurity protection subcommittees, some of the different things they're doing. Cyber risk assessment. I've worked with some folks here in the Kentucky Department of Homeland Security as I tried to figure out, where do I take this? Okay, when I said, hey, this would be a great idea to do in Kentucky, I started with the Kent County Emergency Management people. They got me to the Kentucky Department of Homeland Security people. I've talked to some folks in the National Guard, and there is a lot of interest in this, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, the state government is going to have to do something with this to make this happen. And the cyber risk assessment piece, I would argue, would be one of the most valuable pieces. Your average small government like the city of Fort Wright. We've got about 6,000 residents, about a $9 million budget. We don't have IT people. It's outsourced through a third party. We are fortunate that, well, you could argue fortunate or unfortunate, because once you hear too much of my doom, you'll be like, yeah, thank God that guy's not my mayor. But we spend a lot of time and effort and energy on trying to make sure our systems are secure. We have the resources to do that, and I work in the business. Most cities don't really understand the risk to their residents, especially from a critical infrastructure standpoint. The theft of residents' information, business information, tax information, that sort of thing. And the idea that an organization like this, funded by the state, potentially operated out of the Kentucky National Guard, where you could bring in people to do assessments for cities and help them see where their gaps are and what they need to do to address it, would be a huge win. You know, one of the things I struggle with a lot is, despite the fact that I know most of the folks in Northern Kentucky in other cities, I think a lot of them see me as trying to sell them something because I'm in a business that does this. So they don't necessarily take my doom-laden predictions with the authenticity that I hope that they would. Whereas I think, for example, if someone from the Kentucky National Guard or someone from the Kentucky Department of Homeland Security came in and told them the same things I was saying, but they didn't have that sales aspect to it, I think they'd be likely to take them more seriously. And I see that as one of the main ways this type of organization and initiative could provide value, because the Kentucky National Guard isn't trying to sell you anything, right? The Governance and Public Awareness Subcommittee, again, I'm just going to touch on a couple of these key points. Using public awareness tools to educate and inform key decision makers of good cybersecurity practices, sharing threat intelligence between both public and private sector entities. Again, sometimes just knowing there's a threat out there would allow you to get out in front of it before it becomes a crisis. And you don't have to look too far to find examples, not only in Kentucky, but across the nation, of local governments that have been hit with really devastating cyber attacks. Columbus, Ohio, for example, here recently. Government agencies. Now, again, these are the numbers from Ohio, so you can take in the full scope here, but I know there are, thanks to the Kentucky League of Cities, there are over 400 cities in Kentucky. Obviously, we have 120 counties, so that alone is a sizable number of government agencies that could use this kind of help, and most of whom are not in a financial position or resourced up to take care of this themselves. You know, I was going to try to get the numbers of critical infrastructure from Kentucky Homeland Security, but I unfortunately did not have time to get that beforehand. You can see Ohio has identified 11,440 entities that fit into that bucket. I'm sure our number is somewhere around that as well. The Ohio Cyber Reserve. Again, this is how I originally became aware of this. I think it's a really cool idea. I love what they're doing with it. And essentially, without reading all this to you, the long and short of it is they're working with private sector volunteers like me and other folks to essentially create a civilian cyber reserve that essentially works as adjuncts with the Ohio National Guard. So you go train with them at the cyber range, you train with them at these special sessions, and then if you are, fully embedded in the thing, you can be called up and they'll actually pay you, as it mentions here in another slide. So, for example, the teams are provided training equipment and IDs and work out of Ohio National Guard armories. When fully trained and certified, will be available for call up to assist in a cyber response. Volunteers who are not fully trained but have been vetted can be used to support student mentoring efforts. So again, this, in my opinion, super well thought out plan. They've been doing this since 2019. This was originally Senate Bill 52 in Ohio, was passed in 2019. So they've been at this for a while. Now, there are other states who have similar initiatives. Ohio is not unique in this regard, but from what I've been able to tell, and thankfully, again, to Mark Bell and various other folks in Ohio, they've provided an enormous amount of information. And this just feels like this could work really, really well in Kentucky without a whole lot of re-engineering. You can see the mission set of the Ohio Cyber Reserve: assist. So while you're in volunteer status, you assist. You can educate, whether it's local governments or public outreach or whatever. And then if there is some sort of crisis and they don't have enough people in the Ohio National Guard to respond to it, folks who have volunteered to do this can be called up and will be paid in an emergency type of situation. So this is one of the education programs, the Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement Program. Again, I know I'm going fast, but you guys have the deck, and I know you're already going over here, so I'm just trying to hit what I think are the really salient points here. Delivered at no cost to Ohio-based local government entities. I recently went to a Kentucky Department of Homeland Security sponsored event with a bunch of other government agencies, and I talked to a whole bunch of the people there, trying to raise awareness about this idea. And I can tell you, most of these folks, and I encourage you to talk to the local government agencies in your particular districts, you're going to find most of them have no idea about any of this stuff. They're concerned about it, they're probably overwhelmed, and they don't really know where to turn, which is where this sort of program could really provide some significant help. Couple last things they're doing here in Ohio through this program. They're working on a state aggregate purchasing program, which could significantly lower the cost for some of the tools that would be required to implement this. They're creating this Cyber Fusion Center, and then they're doing a support for a .gov migration. Now, we recently did this in Fort Wright because CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, took over the .gov domain. And they've now basically set up a program where you have to be vetted. You have to go through a formal vetting process with the federal government to get a domain name registered with .gov. We used to be fortright.com. We switched to this. Again, I don't want to belabor this too much, but there's a long laundry list of reasons from CISA and FBI and DHS about why local governments should do this. Again, we just took it upon ourselves to do it because I'm a nerd and I thought it was the right thing to do, and it really doesn't take that much effort or cost that much money. However, in Ohio, OC3 is working with local governments in Ohio to help them make this transition. So this would be another way an organization like this could provide value. Again, I don't want to belabor the .gov thing too much. I would encourage you, again, when you go back to your districts and you talk to your local government agencies, they should be looking at doing this. And I'm happy to provide whatever advice anyone needs. They can call me anytime and I can explain, what it entails. Because again, for us in the city of Fort Wright, we might have spent a couple $1,000s to do it. I mean, it was pretty trivial in the grand scheme of things relative to the additional protection that it provides. So to kind of wrap this up here, I think this is the core concept of the whole thing of what they managed to pull off here. In Ohio, this is supported by a, quote, whole government approach, and you can see the primary sponsors, namely the Adjutant General's Office. Again, this operates out of the Ohio National Guard. It's funded by the state of Ohio, and they have a specific team of people who are operating this thing. And you can see some of the other agencies involved: Department of Higher Education, Department of Education, Admin Services, Public Safety and Transportation, and then over 120 organizations who are active members involved in OC3 in some way. This is a guy named Mikko Hipponen. He's an internationally renowned cybersecurity expert, and I'm a big fan because I think he brings things down to a level that most people can understand. And this is him giving a TED Talk, and I think this really is where we are. We're no longer securing computers, we're securing society. Everything has software in it now, or will soon. I would encourage you all, if you haven't looked, and if you bought a new car recently, you might want to check out Mozilla's Privacy Not Included website, because your car is basically a rolling Orwellian spy device that's sucking up every piece of information about you that you could imagine. I could tell you there's no chance. In fact, Ford recently announced a patent where they plan to listen to you while you're driving and look at your location and then try to sell you stuff. Yeah, this is all well documented. I'm not making this up. So I can tell you I won't be buying any new cars soon. So again, I kind of leave you with this idea that we really are securing society by taking these steps. And then my ask, we need something like this in Ohio. Is Ohio's program perfect? Probably not. But again, it's got a lot of legs under it. It's got a lot of support. It's getting a lot of positive press. It's getting a lot of engagement from the private sector, and I think has been very successful. It provides resources to protect critical infrastructure for Ohioans. It bolsters the Ohio workforce and economy, right? So to me, those two things alone are a win-win. If we can get people the right skills and the right training to stay in Kentucky and provide these critical services to protect our fellow Kentuckians, how is that not a win? Raise awareness about cybersecurity in general for the general public, which increasingly affects us all. Get students interested in these important and critical careers, right? Again, most of these jobs pay well. You can work remotely. We need these people to stay in Kentucky. Again, I mentioned this before, help stop the brain drain. My ask of you is to take a careful look at what Ohio's done. Like I say, they have been super forthcoming and super helpful with information. They've provided everything I've asked for. I've got the name of the state senator who originally sponsored this in Ohio. I don't see any reason why we can't take this and perhaps maybe with a little tweaking, literally make it work for Kentucky, much like Ohio has done. There are numerous people across the state, both in academia that I've spoken to, in law enforcement, in Homeland Security, who are sort of on board with this, but trying to figure out, how do we make this happen? Again, I've spoken to folks in Department of Homeland Security, the Kentucky CISA people, people from the University of Louisville and the city of Louisville, people from Murray State, folks at Gateway, folks at NKU. There's a lot of folks who are willing to sort of form the nexus that we would need, assuming the legislature and the executive branch can get together and do something with this. It's going to take money, obviously, and I can't speak on behalf of the Kentucky National Guard, but it feels like that would be the perfect home for it in the state of Kentucky, like Ohio, assuming there's funding and personnel for it. And I think we need to adopt a whole government approach. And then finally, so what can I do to help each one of you make this happen in the state of Kentucky? And I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'll shut up and let you all get out of here. thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Senator McDaniel and members of the committee.
Mayor, thank you very much. We're going to start out with Senator Nemes in the front here.
Wow, Mr. Hatter, where were you 2 years ago when I was preaching this?
Well,
Not
I wish I would have known that, Senator.
Not as well as you, because what they are doing is very similar to what we were trying to do, or I was trying to do. We kind of broke it down into 4 parts. Y'all broke it down differently, but kind of the same. Education, government, which you elaborated to much, businesses, and security, which is the military, the homeland security in that. We were wanting to start sort of a center or a hub of all 4 of those things and more, which I'm assuming you went to Ohio because we didn't have anything in Kentucky.
Well, Senator, that would be correct, because I asked around a little bit and I couldn't find anyone that said, yeah, this is how this works in Kentucky, and
Well,
knowing
it doesn't
folks in
work
Ohio.
in Kentucky, but how
Yes.
we want it to work in Kentucky. So the return on investment, the money, where the money would come from. Well, the money, Tampa and Georgia have similar things also, that more military, but expands into the rest. Their return on investment is now they have income paying back to the state instead of drawing from the state. So I'm very interested in talking with you and getting things going, because I could not convince our legislature to do this, because we started with this, and it ended up being education only. We're doing, and we've started the education part of this, doing a good job. And you talk to Murray, Northern Kentucky, and U of L, and they're doing that, and we put money into that. But that's just one little piece, and I couldn't get it across that was one piece of what we want to do here, and which will be beneficial not just in solving problems that may become. It's also to help businesses, governments that local governments can't afford this, and if you're working in one area, you can rely on the security of the FBI, the Secret Service, the professionals at U of L or Murray to work together in an area that they wouldn't never normally do. So thank you for coming here, and I apologize that our state got a little territorial on the education part and they didn't either understand or didn't want the rest of it. So I'm willing to work with you to get it going.
Well, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to help, Senator. I, again, appreciate the opportunity to explain this, and we have plenty of time to make this happen, hopefully. Maybe in the next session, if possible.
Thank you.
That's up to you all.
Well, I would like to mention a couple of things. First of all, I've never actually been invited down into the mayor's bunker. But I think it was because I said I was going to bring the Roomba to clean up. So
it's an undisclosed location, Senator. If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
But I did find it interesting, and one thing I want to throw out to the committee, his use of this image of a keyboard superimposed on a pineapple grenade. The original use of that was actually in a book called 3 Dangerous Men, dealing with the influence of nation-state actors in large and small scale stuff. I would encourage everybody to take a look at that, as it is pretty good. And we don't think about it a lot of times, because when we first had this conversation, I have an interest in this. Dave obviously has an exceptional passion in it. But, if we thought about the idea that if we didn't have police departments, but yet we still had schools, and we still had banks, and we still had roads, and think of all the things that our police force does for us there. And this is kind of a similar ilk. These are devices and technologies that cross into our banks and into our schools and onto our roads. And having something that can work in this space, some type of a whole of government approach to this space, is of tremendous economic importance to us, and I wanted to give him the opportunity to come in today and to talk a little bit more about it. So, Mayor, I sincerely appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation you started, and look forward to us talking more about it as the future unfolds.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, members of the committee. Again, happy to discuss this with anybody, anytime, and do anything that I can to help. So, thank you all.
Very well. Okay, at this time, we do have some correspondence that we've received. Interim allotment adjustments from Jenny Bannister, also some reports from Jennifer Hayes, and TIF report that if you enjoy things about TIF, it actually is very riveting. It is a very good report. For the rest of you who aren't nerds like that, I promise I read it. All right, any other business come before the committee today? All right, seeing none, our next meeting will be October the 16th at 1 p.m., chaired by Representative Petrie, and we will stand adjourned.
I got your text.
Go ahead, go for it. Okay.